Hi, I'm Michael Romanowski. We're at Coast Mastering in Berkeley, California, and you're watching BURL TV. Hi, my name is Michael Romanowski. I'm a mastering engineer and the owner of Coast Mastering here in Berkeley, California. And today we're here to talk about the BURL B16 with the BDA4M and the BAD4M. I'm using both sets of converters in this box. This is a welcomed, awesome addition to my studio, and I want to tell you about it. One of the great things and aspects I rely on a daily basis for the B16 is the choices that I have throughout the process. I don't ever make any adjustments to anybody's work until I've had a chance to listen to it. At that point, then I make my decisions about which direction I'm going to go. Each card has 4 channels, so there's a stereo pair of A to D, another stereo pair of A to D, stereo pair of D to A, and another stereo pair of D to A, which gives me tremendous flexibility to find combinations that work for the clients that I'm trying to take care of. One of the things that really struck me about the sound, lack of, however you want to say it, the B16, about the characteristic that I like about it is there's a musicalness to it. There's a clarity of instruments. It's not being muddied by other things that are getting in the way. You know, to me, it's one of those things, I would call it analogous, no pun intended, to the digital world in the resolution aspect. The things about high resolution is really about lowering the noise floor and getting closer to those low-level details that allow you to hear what's going on a deeper level. I find that with the B16, you know, I'm getting that sound. It's how the analog circuitry, the Class A circuitry, is working to clean up or to not introduce phasing problems or anomalies into the audio path gives me a, I don't want to say wider. You know what? Here's the thing. Like you hear the adjectives of things make it wider, brighter, smaller, taller, bigger, whatever it is. It's not. It's getting things out of the way that were causing it to feel like that in the first place. Like it's like having a towel over the speakers in a way. It's not that what's coming out of the speakers it's wrong, is that something else is getting in the way. And what I like about the B16 and I like about the circuitry, this Class A circuitry just sounds right to me. What it does is it gets problems, anomalies out of the way. It doesn't introduce artifacts into the audio. It leaves them alone, which gives me that chance to be into it, to lean into the audio, to hear the bass being more clear and solid. The low end is something that, for me, really feels bigger without being more. It feels stronger without feeling, you know, oppressive or pushed. The same kind of thing into the top. Like what I like about being able to hear into things is that very fine detail. Those overtones of instruments are what create the different timbral versions of the same note. A C on this is cello is going to be different than a C on a guitar or a C on a piano and all that. And it's the overtone series that's different. The more that we can hear into that overtone series that describes the character of the sound, the more natural the sounds are to begin with, and the less they're going to overlap with other instruments that may have, like, you don't want to cloud up a whole bunch of stuff in a certain range because you're filling in these gaps, but that's not natural necessarily to the instruments. I think things sound best when they become more open and pull you in, and that's one of the things I like about the B16 is that it's got the clarity is not something that's forced, and it's not something that's manipulated. It's actually just peeled back and allowed to be more what it is. And I love that. That's what I need. If I'm going to make decisions on adjusting somebody's audio, I need to hear the audio, not other things getting in the way. So my job is to remove all of the debris and detritus in the front to be able to go, great, now here's what I hear, and here are the decisions I'm going to make because of that. I'm going to go, great, I need a little bit more of this, I need a little less of that. If I'm clouded, all my decisions are wrong. One of the other great functions about the B16 or the BDA4M or the BAD4M, and we'll talk about the A to D side of things at the moment, is the ability to adjust the headroom, to look at the attenuation of what I'm sending my signal path. If I have to deliver a CD master, a vinyl master, and maybe digital audio for streaming services. Those are all 3 different levels and 3 different types of masters for 3 different distribution purposes. By adjusting my headroom, it allows me to get to where I need to go for each one of those while maintaining the integrity of the sound. I can push it if I need to on the front side of things by getting gain into the system to hit the, to hit the transformers or to hit the op amps, but I can compensate for the headroom by how much I'm dialing in the output of that to match what my system is doing. Conversely, if I want to run something and I want to make sure that there's got a tremendous amount of headroom and very open, I can run it really down and I can increase the output of the converters to match my gain structure to allow me to have optimal on either way, whether I'm pushing it or whether I'm allowing it to breathe. That allows me to create the correct master for each one of the type of deliveries that needs to go out. And on top of that, having 2 within the same system gives me a chance. I can speed up the process for my clients by capturing 2 things at once. So it's actually more efficient in my workflow to be able to do that and capture 2 sets at the same time. Same sound, different procedure, different gain structure, ends up at the same place, but I can get 2 completely different presentations of the audio just by knowing how to use the headroom available. I think one of the misconceptions about BURL equipment is that it has a sound to it, and although it does have a sound, you can get a sound out of it. I like the fact that I actually don't have to push it to get the sound of the transformers or the feel, the clarity that comes between using those. There's a depth of field and an overtone and a clarity of phase relationships that really make it sound spectacular. And you don't have to push it to get what we would, some would call a known sound, pushing it like trying to push a tape machine. Tape machines have a sound. They also add problems. Tape machines add noise floor, they add wow and flutter, they have other types of issues when you're trying to say, like you say you want to take your mixes and you want to run them to a tape machine. There are pros and cons to it, of course. There are also, you can achieve most of those pros and eliminate a lot of the cons by using the B16. I still use the tape machine for occasion. I have a label where we only release tape as a format, so I have to be able to use a tape machine. I still get a fair amount of things that come in that have been recorded to tape. That, again, we'll go back to the flexibility of the B16 means I can either use the transformers or not. I can either use the headroom or not. I can either, use different op amps or not, depending on where things come from as a source. As a need for processing equipment, though, I find that I very rarely does a client ever want to or need to go to tape anymore. Occasionally somebody does because they're set on it, they have something in their mind, there's a very specific reason. Fantastic, awesome, all for it, I'm into it. But most times people just want a sound that they feel like tape gives them a saturation or a glue, if you will, a way to kind of pull the audio together. And I can say definitively you can get that sound without the noise floor of what's happening over here by using the B16 rather than the tape machine. And I don't care if it's 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 1 inch. There are pros and cons. 15 IPS, 7.5 IPS, 30 IPS. This tape formulation, that formulation. There are a huge range of options and availability of sort of shifting the tonal nature to it. And when somebody says they want to go to tape and you go, wait, what do you want to do on that thing? Like, oh, I don't know. Those are options? I didn't know there were options. I just want this sound. And I go, well, I can do that without all of these decisions that you don't necessarily know or understand. But I think I know where you're trying to go with it, and I can do that with the B16. I love the sound of that for that. It eliminates lots of questions, lots of problems, and it solves a lot of other problems and puts a lot of smiles on people's face, including mine. I really rely on the flexibility to be able to have transformers in and out, which is cool. I can have transformers in, I can have transformers out. Sometimes I may want the transformer in on some songs on the A to D, maybe not on the D to A. Same kind of thing, I may be on the D to A, but not the A to D. after listening to a piece of music, something that I'm working on, and determining what needs, what might be the best course of action to be able to take it to where it needs to go, a lot of times, many times, the simpler path, the better. The fewer things that get in the way, the better, but the right choices of those things that are being brought in. I'm using, outboard gear, and many of it has tubes, many has transformers, many have both, many have, neither. Well, there's all sorts of flavors of things. And sometimes I may, to get a certain sound, if I didn't have the B16 or the BDA4M, and that transformer, the BX5 in it, I may not be able to, I may have to run through another piece of gear to get the sound of something I want, but I'm also adding the other things that it adds to it that I may not want to add. It's the things that go along as baggage for the ride. We look at acceptable amounts of, well, I want this, so I'll take a little bit of that. With the BDA4M and the transformer in it, and if I go that direction, I can actually feed that out, attenuate the headroom, give me what I need to do to feed the next stage in my chain that may be something simple like a simple EQ, and then back in. An example might be classical music, or some very open jazz or something like that, where there's a lot of headroom, open up a lot of space, and it's mostly, my work then would mostly be about presentation and polishing and not being too much on it. For example, again, I said classical music, but a good rule of thumb is you just don't compress classical music. That the dynamics are part of the composition well more so than pop music or blues or something else like that. So if I wanted to get the sound without having to feel like I'm compressing it, I can get that tonality throughout the frequency response and the dynamic range or the gain structure of the audio, adjust the headroom of the output to match what the next piece of gear along the line needs, and then capture it back in with or without the BX1 as a transformer, again, depending on what I need to get to it. One of the things I think is great about back to having transformers and the ability to push or not push gives a chance to do saturation in a different way. You can, there's peak saturation and there's peak limiting. There are, two different things that are going on. And occasionally on work I'm doing, I want to be able to do a little peak limiting. I want the transformer to take the big hits down. Maybe it's something that was really like let's say a big rock record that the snare just really pokes out very strongly, intentionally so, and in the mix it needs to be a big part of it, but it might be too much. It might be something that's distracting from, let's say, the vocals or something else that might be a little bit smoother. Using a little bit of peak limiting through the transformer, the linearity of it allows a very smooth textural change where you're not noticing the tonal differences that can happen when you're pushing a tape or you're pushing some other, pushing a compressor or some other thing to get to those transients, just to ease them down a bit, to sit into the mix. Again, back to that glue thing, without making the glue go, hey, there's glue, and it's off, and it becomes, opens up the sound, or the sound does this, and then it comes back to something else. There's a consistency in feel. We're just knocking down those transients a little bit, and I think that's one of the stellar things about the BX1 as a transformer, being able to have in that path, is I can push and knock those down just a little bit if I need to, without dramatically changing the tonality to grab attention to somebody going, something just happened there because the tone shifted or the phase is different or something else is going on that makes me go, wait a minute, that changed and now it's back to something else. And keep the consistency of sound and achieve the results I'm looking for by being able to push that peak limiting a little bit through the transformer. That allows me to be as simple as possible, as effective as possible, and not overly processing for the sake of trying to achieve a certain sound. So again, I get a lot of flexibility on trying to be minimal, and the B16 with its with its accoutrements makes it a lot easier for me to be able to be simple and just as effective without adding unwanted introductions. There are different op amps options available. The BOPA 11 and the BOPA 14 are the two separate op amps available at the moment, and I think they have different sounds and they have different characteristics. So I like having the option to be able to choose. I've populated mine with one set of each, in HD to A and each A to D. This gives me the flexibility to choose based on what I'm hearing and where my client, where they'd like to get to, which one is the most appropriate for the work. A lot of times I found that the sound and the enhancement of each one of those, or what each one of those is giving, will allow me to be less heavy-handed on EQ. There are things I can do less to it because I'm getting the tonality or the picture or the presentation that I want out of those choices of transformers or op amps. Sometimes in mixing, somebody's going to be sending me, they're obviously sending me their mixes, and sometimes people overprocess them. For whatever reason, they're a little heavy-handed coming to me. So I don't want to be more heavy-handed on top of what they're sending me to get to something, so I may choose a different op amp based on what I'm getting. If I need to have something that is, in my mind, in my ears, what I hear about the 14s is that it's a much more sort of across-the-board feel. It gives me frequency from top to bottom, and then especially throughout the mid-range, because I think that's where the 11 is a little bit different, is that is across the board, that it feels consistent across the frequency response, how it's handling things that are going on. If somebody brings me something that's got the smiley face on it, they've already done a little bit of EQ because they think that pre-EQing it ahead of time for mastering is saving a step, like over-compressing, which neither of them save a step, but that's a different topic for a different time. But having something that's over-processed when it comes in, I want to be as little about it as I can to be able to, again, maintain the integrity of the audio. But if somebody's got something that they're trying to pre-process a hype, lack of a better word, or a heatedness out of it, for a better word, sometimes I'll find that the 11s work better for me because I feel like they're a little more mid-range forward a bit. For me, I feel that sort of presence come up a little, and to me, I would relate that to more of the sound of BURL I've known in the past of some of the equipment, is to be, kind of that lean in like this. And that's what I get about the 11s. The 14s for me just sort of have this sit back feeling, whereas the 11s are more like, okay, cool, this is kind of up in your face just a little bit. And again, that's all dependent on the content, dependent on the engineer, dependent on where they're trying to get to with the music, but that flexibility to make that choice, I think is super huge, and it just makes my day faster, easier, more efficient, and more targeted, for that matter. Another great function of that is if I had the same op amps on both sides, and let's say I'm working on a vinyl master and a CD master at the same time. Well, we know that the deliverables are different, and the requirements for cutting lacquers need as much headroom as possible. So I can not push it so much on one set of outputs and push again a little bit more on another set of outputs, capture the same tonality, but allow the dynamics and the headroom and the transients that are necessary for each type of format. So it's a beautiful piece of gear to be able to do a couple of things, many things at one time with, and a huge amount of flexibility, and right there we're just talking about the A to D stage, so we're just getting into it at that point. I love having the BDA4M because it gives me flexibility and options for getting back into the analog world. My main use is to monitor the throughput of what I'm capturing, so I'm using the D to A as the confidence monitoring for the choices I've made. Some people may ask, well, if this is a mastering piece of gear, why are there 4? Who needs that in mastering? And for me, all of my work is done out of the box. So since I'm out of the box, I'm listening, but I want to listen. It's imperative to listen at the back, at the end of what you're working on, so you know what it's going to sound like, what you're getting. So you have to have a second set of converters to be able to get to that stage. So you need to feed the system, but then you need to feed this system right here to be able to know that the decisions you're making after the fact are correct. You're not introducing something else that you can't hear and you're surprised by later on. I think this is the whole package. I think it gives me a wide dynamic range with an extremely wide frequency response that is neutral and natural. I was a bit predisposed to think that BURL had a color before I dug into it too hard and saw what it could do for me. And what it does for me is gives me flexibility, and not only tonal, but headroom and sound and vibe and feel and clarity that I'm required, that I need in my work.